Welcome to AK Anime Explainer. Today is explanation of Soul Land 3, Legend of the Dragon King Part 256. Without any delay, start explanation. Tang Wulin nodded. I understand. It's just like having 9 partitions in deep waters. When the water on the topmost layer is removed, the weight borne by the other partitions will be lighter. Since there's one less partition, the time it takes for the other partitions to break down will be shorter. Yes, that sounds right. As long as your safety is guaranteed, the earlier you break through the final seals, the better it'll be for you. It'll buy you more time. Similarly, the sooner you can absorb the energy contained within the seals, the quicker you can boost your strength. It'll also make you better in controlling the powerful energies and hasten your evolution. I understand. Tang Wulin nodded. So, I'll begin attempting the 10th seal after I've condensed my soul core, said Tang Wulin determinedly. Old Tang nodded forcefully. Exactly. Tang Wulin looked as if he was pondering something. Time is short and the mission can't wait. 12 years, that was the length of time he had. Meanwhile, the heavy burden of restoring Shrek Academy was on his shoulders. No matter what, he could not waste any more time. Old Tang said, what I've told you are the dangers that you'll face in the future. Are you facing any problems in your cultivation? Your cultivation growth has restored my memories somewhat. I can give you some pointers. Tang Wulin replied, a serious problem that I'm facing right now is the Golden Dragon 9 moves that I've been cultivating, which was handed down to me by my grand teacher. He died during the battle where Shrek Academy was destroyed. I've not learned the final 3 moves of the Golden Dragon 9 moves and the domain-related abilities. I have my Dragon Core now, and I think that I'm able to cultivate it already. Also, with the enhancement of my cultivation base, the effects of my Golden Dragon Spear has grown stronger. However, I can only use it with my own strength and speed. There are no good spear techniques from the Tang sect, and I think it's a waste. After Old Tang heard what Tang Wulin said, he replied with a faint smile, those aren't difficult problems. Regarding the Golden Dragon 9 moves, in truth, it's good enough for you to learn the first 6 moves. The latter domain-related abilities can't be learned in the first place. You must figure it out yourself. That's probably why the Scarlet Dragon Doluo didn't teach you. When you're at the doorstep of the domains, you'll have to create your own unique abilities instead of learning it from someone. Only the techniques that you've created yourself will suit you the most. Haven't you thought it through before I called you here? The combination of your bloodline power and martial soul is the path which you will tread in the future. Tang Wulin's eyes brightened. He seemed to have grasped the idea somewhat. Maybe, the turning point will happen when he formed his own soul core. As for spearing techniques, said Old Tang while smiling faintly, I've developed this for you. This spearing technique was created by a god. It suits you very well. A spearing technique created by a god. Tang Wulin's eyes sparkled. It requires you to contemplate on it and endure the hardship during your cultivation. I'll teach you the first move today, the 1,000 accusing fingers. As he said this, Old Tang swung his right arm and a beam of golden light appeared in his hand. It resembled Tang Wulin's Golden Dragon Spear. He pointed the spear to his front and a beam of light erupted, quick as lightning. Thousands upon thousands of golden lights burst forth in the skies. Tang Wulin felt countless spears' consciousness impale his body as if his soul was shattered under the spear's consciousness. Just when he was pained to the point of crying out, the spear's consciousness suddenly faded. He saw a giant golden spear shoot past his eyes. Thousands upon thousands of golden lights were condensed into a single beam of light. The dome of the heaven seemed to be stabbed through in this instant. It was truly some spearing technique. It was not known how much time had elapsed. When Tang Wulin woke up from his meditation, his clothes were completely wet. However, he felt thoroughly relaxed and refreshed. Old Tang returned to his slumber. As to when he would wake up again, he only mentioned that he would be up when Tang Wulin had truly mastered the 1,000 accusing fingers. Currently, Tang Wulin's mind was completely filled with the spear's consciousness. It was his first time experiencing the spear's consciousness being used in such a way. The spear was the king of weapons. This was what old Tang had told him. If he wished to master the spearing techniques, he had to strike out a kingly path of his own. Tang Wulin spent the entire day immersed in the spear's consciousness. He was startled awake when his alarm clock rang on the second day, signaling the start of the mecha competition. How time flew! With his dragon core, he did not feel hungry even when he had not eaten for a whole day. He entered the Star-Do cabin connected to the battle network. A light flashed and he reappeared in the West Division Stadium. However, Tang Wulin felt numb currently. There was nothing else on his mind except for the spear's consciousness. He went to the other side of the stadium where the mecha combat area was. The competition begins. Please select your mecha type, melee or long range. Melee. Tang Wulin made his choice instinctively. It was only then that he realized he had chosen wrongly. Please select the weapon to be used with your melee mecha, came the electronic voice again. A series of weapons appeared for him to choose. There were more than a dozen choices: saber, spear, sword, halberd, hatchet, battle axe, hook, battle fork, whip, mace, hammer, claw, pronged spear, and meteor hammer. All in all, 18 types of weapons were available. It was surprisingly different from the test before this. Were they offered the chance to select their weapons at the competition stage? Tang Wulin was greatly surprised. He picked the spear almost without hesitation. He was currently immersed in the spear's consciousness. Although controlling a mecha to wield the spear was different from wielding it himself, the objective was to operate the mecha as if it was one's own body. A light flashed and a 12-meter-tall melee mecha appeared on the competition grounds. Tang Wulin was sitting within the mecha. A 15-meter-long massive spear appeared in the mecha's grasp. The mecha emanated an impressive domineering aura. On the other hand, his opponent who stood opposite him was operating a long-range mecha equipped with a soul cannon. It was no different from before. Could it be that the organizers felt that melee mechas were at a disadvantage during the testing stages? That might have been why there were so many additions to the choice of weapons. It was the opposite situation from when he first fought in the mecha competition. Melee against long range. 3, 2, 1, begin. The smart electronic voice was curt as usual. Boom! 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 The long-range mecha opposite Tang Wulin had begun to attack him at the first opportunity it had. It raised its hand and fired 3 shots in a row. The 3 soul ammunitions formed the 3 vertices of a triangle which went straight toward Tang Wulin. Tang Wulin controlled the mecha to grip the spear tightly. In an instant, there seemed to be an endless spear's consciousness appearing in front of him. He shook the spear in his hands and stabbed thrice with lightning speed. Without missing a beat, he had detonated the 3 soul ammunitions while the mecha itself stood unmoving on the ground. It was not the spearing technique of the 1,000 accusing fingers, but Tang Wulin's control of the mecha. It reflected the combination of his agility and pure strength. When he stabbed with his spear, he began to feel something different. The king of weapons, a kingly path. Boom! 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 Another 5 rounds of ammunition were fired at him. Again, he stabbed 5 times with his spear to nullify his opponent's attacks. Tang Wulin's mecha had still not budged from its initial spot. The sensation truly came. During actual combat, he had just simply stabbed with his spear. However, with every stab of the spear, Tang Wulin felt that the trajectories of the spear were like kingly paths. Amidst the flickering of the spear's glow, halos swirled and lingered in the air. The long-range mecha opposite him was also acting strangely. Normally, when a melee mecha was faced with a long-range opponent, the melee mecha would attempt to close in on its opponent if given the opportunity, whereas the long-range mecha would attempt to put more distance between itself and its opponent. For a melee mecha to stand riveted to the ground while withstanding the long-range attacks of its opponent, as what Tang Wulin was doing now, such a situation would probably not have occurred in a competition. However, the truth was right before their eyes. Tang Wulin had done just that. The long-range mecha opposite him was befuddled. It went around Tang Wulin's mecha in circles as it continuously fired shots of soul ammunitions toward him. If it were a contest of energy consumption, a long-range mecha would not be worried. If it continued to fire away like this, the melee mecha would definitely be the one to buckle. The recoil of the spear from stabbing at the soul ammunitions expended energy. Long-range mechas were weak in defense and were slower than melee mechas. However, their energy storage was much more than melee mechas. A dragged-out battle such as this was something long-range mechas would love to engage in. Currently, Tang Wulin's opponent was most likely thinking of how he had met such a queer person. Did this person come here to die? However, Tang Wulin felt different. To him, the endless rounds of ammunition fired at him were opportunities for him to practice with his spear. With every stab of the spear, the trajectory seemed to leave an imprint in his mind. In just a short while, he had stabbed 100 times with the 100 trajectories imprinted in his consciousness. It was a wonderful feeling. He stabbed, retracted, and stabbed again repeatedly. The king of weapons, a kingly path. The energies of both parties were decreasing continuously. If a melee mecha did not dodge the long-range mecha's attacks, it would consume more energy and at a faster rate, although it was blocking the attacks with a weapon. The energy level of Tang Wulin's mecha was already at a critical level after 10 minutes. The lights in the internal control room turned red to alert him, but Tang Wulin remained calm as ever as he controlled the mecha to stab time and again. The 1,000 pointing fingers, the 10,000 spears as one. It was where the essence of this move lay. Old Tang told Tang Wulin that he had to brandish his spear at least 10 million times in actual combat if he wanted to master this move. To stab his spear 10 million times in actual combat. That's a pretty large number. However, Tang Wulin was not one to give up easily. The battle before him was his best practice. The alarm beeped. His energy level dropped below 10%. The barrage from his opponent had also increased in intensity. His opponent clearly knew the total amount of energy contained within his standard mecha. Tang Wulin's melee mecha finally moved. He suddenly dashed forward. The thrusters behind him shone brightly. Just when his mecha was left with the last ounce of energy, he made a forward charge with his melee mecha. Of course, he wanted to win. Only by winning could he proceed to the next stage of the competition to further meet people who would provide him the opportunity to practice with his spear. Inside the long-range mecha, a trace of disdain appeared at the edges of the mecha master's lips. Did he only think of counterattacking at the final moment? That's impossible. Similarly, his opponent engaged the thrusters and sped to the side in an attempt to put more distance between themselves. Although the melee mechas were faster than the long-range mechas, they were not that much faster. If the long-range mecha wanted to catch up to him, it was still possible with a single burst of speed from the thrusters. What puzzled this long-range mecha master was the non-stop stabbing motion of the spear in his opponent's hands. It stabbed at the air with blinding speed. The melee mecha suddenly shone with a golden glow. Soul power infusion? Other than the energy provided from its own soul battery, a mecha can also be powered by soul power infused by a soul master. When the long-range mecha master saw Tang Wulin resorting to this, he was not surprised but rejoiced instead. At the same time, he increased the distance between them. He continued to fire away with his soul cannon. Every long-range mecha master had a determined heart and ample patience. At this very moment, he felt something was off. He noticed the controls of his mecha suddenly slowed down. An indescribable fear suddenly appeared in the depths of his heart. Even such a large-sized mecha could not alleviate the fear he had within him. An intense pressure filled the air. Right then, he saw the huge spear in the charging mecha's grasp stabbing 100 times in an instant. The tip of the spear flickered with a faint golden light. The two mechas closed in on each other rapidly. The long-range mecha master clearly wanted his mecha to accelerate, but there seemed to be something suppressing him, slowing his movements down. If the competition ground were used for a battle between soul masters, it would have been too vast. However, for mechas with heights taller than 10 meters, a sudden spurt of speed could bring the two opponents close enough until they were face to face. What just happened? The long-range mecha master was frightened. The shadow of the spear with its golden glow had completely enveloped his mecha. Unleash martial soul. Too late. It was beyond his judgment. When his mecha was blasted to bits in a large explosion, he was sent out of the competition grounds. He had no idea how he had lost. Tang Wulin looked at the mecha in front of him, which was reduced to a wreck. Then, he looked at the spear in his own hands. A kingly path, a kingly heart. He mumbled these words in his heart. Suddenly, a glimmer of enlightenment arose within him. The forward charge he made a few moments ago was not to close in on his opponent but to unleash the spear's consciousness within him. Clearly, his opponent's cultivation base was not powerful. Under the assault from his spear's consciousness, his opponent's spirit was intimidated. Even the armor of the mecha could not prevent the onslaught from reaching him. It was under such circumstances that Tang Wulin closed in on him to finish him off with a single strike. The attack could not be regarded as the 1,000 pointing fingers, it did not even come close. However, within a short span of time under old Tang's guidance, Tang Wulin had grasped the intricacies of the spear's consciousness. Although the insight was brief, it was enough to raise his understanding of the spear to the next level. A king controlled the world and possessed all kinds of riches. A king's heart was steady as a rock even when faced with 1,000 accusing fingers. If he was going to use a king's spear, he had to have a king's heart first. A king's heart with the determination to win and persistence to master the spear. He exited the Star-Do battle network. Tang Wulin unleashed his golden dragon spear the first opportunity he got. He gripped it tightly in his hands. He had decided that from this day on, the spear should not leave his hands. He could only become one with it when he genuinely felt it, be intimate with it, and obsess over it. I'm hungry, let's eat. When Tang Wulin entered the cafeteria with the golden dragon spear in his hands, he drew many side glances. However, there were no rules in the Blood God army that forbade soldiers from carrying their weapons while having their meals. After all, a battle against the abyssal creatures could commence at any time. Everyone should always have their weapons at their sides. Tang Wulin only ordered one set. Naturally, he picked the best. Window number 1. Currently, he had ample merits which could not be used for promotion anyway. He would treat himself to a good meal. He held the spear in his left hand and ate with his right. Yo, brother. What has gotten over you? Jiang Wuyue sat down beside Tang Wulin. When he saw the golden dragon spear in his hand, he could not help but ask in astonishment. Tang Wulin smiled and said, "Oh, it's nothing. I've been practicing with the spear lately. It feels better for me to be holding it. You're only eating this much." When he saw the exquisite food on Tang Wulin's platter, Jiang Wuyue could not help salivating. Tang Wulin had only now noticed that Jiang Wuyue's military rank was that of a colonel. It seemed that an abyssal tide would bring a faster promotion to those with power. "Congratulations, Colonel," said Tang Wulin with a smile. Jiang Wuyue said, "Why hasn't your rank changed? Judging by your performance the other day, you should have been promoted to a captain already. I should be the one congratulating you. You're already in the Blood God Battalion while I'm not even in its shadow. My father once said that my martial soul is domineering, but after 9 rings, it's still lacking in power. After all, it's not a true real dragon bloodline. I reckon it's the reason why the Blood God Battalion isn't interested in me." Tang Wulin said with astonishment, "But you have the Overlord Dragon martial soul. Isn't the Blood God Battalion impressed with that?" Jiang Wuyue said, "I've heard rumors that those with martial souls which are the foundation of Limit Duluos can qualify to join the Blood God Battalion. Clearly, you can. That's why you're already a supernumerary personnel. You probably know that there are countless people in our army working their asses off to obtain such a position. How many days have you been here? You truly have my admiration, envy, and hatred. I'll treat you to a number 1 meal," said Tang Wulin, who was all smiles. Jiang Wuyue's eyes brightened up. "1 set may not be enough. Forget it then." If Tang Wulin, with his personality, did not have a good impression of Jiang Wuyue, he would not have treated him to a meal. Jiang Wuyue guffawed. "All right, 1 set it is." The two of them conversed as they ate. The conversation naturally focused on the Federal Star-Do Battle Network challenge. The first round is over. I'm now hoping that I'll not face you before I get to the top. 32, Jiang Wuyue said earnestly. Tang Wulin said with a bitter smile, you think I want to face you? Jiang Wuyue replied, with your strength, it shouldn't be a problem for you to be in the top. 32. However, luck usually plays a determining role in competitions like this. Let's see how our fortunes turn out. You seem to be taking this seriously. As he said this, he pointed at Tang Wulin's golden dragon spear. He had taken quite a liking to the impressive weapon. However, ever since he found out that the spear could not be touched, he kept his distance from it out of respect. Tang Wulin also glanced at the golden dragon spear in his hands as he focused on the intrinsic golden color and large blade at the tip. His heart could not help but fill with pride. The king's spear. He must master its true essence. Otherwise, he would be disrespecting this divine tool that seemed to have been born alongside him. Yes, in Tang Wulin's heart, the golden dragon spear was a divine tool. If he had not had it, how could he have condensed his dragon core so quickly? As he looked at the golden dragon spear with slight admiration, Jiang Wuyue said, you should be breaking through to rank 60 soon, right? Do you need a new spirit soul? If you're planning to get one here, we'll have to go to the Fire Basin Spirit Pagoda. The spirit souls supplied by the Spirit Pagoda to our blood god army are of high quality. Tang Wulin shook his head. I don't need that. I have a suitable one already. Of course, he did. The damask tulip was within his nature's seed. He could feel the damask tulips and the various 100,000-year cultivation-based plant soul beasts' auras. They could be regarded as Tang Wulin's true hidden secret. A grey wind blew over the land. It gave the landscape a bleak and chilly atmosphere as if the entire world was grey. It was due to the accumulation of countless ashes. The grey world was vast, and its ends unseen. There were no stars or sun, only an endless grey shade. Beyond the swathe of grey was an even deeper grey. If a living being came here, the only thing it could feel was the despair emanating from this place. The endless despair radiated far away. It was boundless and without limit. There was a figure walking slowly within this forsaken world. His entire body was covered by a large black cloak and was surrounded by a layer of black air which repelled the grey color outside. If it was said that the surroundings had an aura of despair, then his was that of deathly stillness. Deathly stillness and despair did not conflict with each other, nor did they clash. Why have you come here? A low voice suddenly echoed through the surroundings. The entire grey world contorted as if a giant grey vortex was forming. The black figure finally stopped walking. He lifted his head slowly. From under the black cloak, two sparkling purple beams shot out. This was coming from his gazing eyes. Lord of the Abyss, isn't it because of your guidance that I'm able to come here? What do you want? The low voice asked about his intentions for coming directly. Our objectives have always been the same, though our means may have differed. What you want is endless consumption and to make the Abyss a special divine realm in your plane. What I want is an endless supply of wronged ghosts, to make death a god and turn the world into a divine realm of death. So what we want has always been the same since the very beginning. The area suddenly stopped contorting. The grey world of despair returned to its normal state. From afar, a grey figure slowly walked toward the man in black. The man in black slowly raised his head, revealing his fair chin. An arc was drawn by the edges of his lips. He was smiling contentedly. He knew that his straightforward words had hit their mark. Nobody would be able to stop his upcoming plans. Destruction was only the beginning. The funny thing was that those idiots had thought that it was hatred that made him commit such a great wrong against the heavens and brought about disaster. However, they did not know that what he wanted was to make an offering of the Dolor continent in order to complete his supreme divine realm. What could a swallow know of the swan's dreams? Those people were merely ants. When he became the Holy Spirit cult's founder, he already had this lofty goal in mind. The current generation was the best opportunity to carry out his plans. The two figures slowly came closer to each other. Everything around them started contorting again. However, a dash of black was added to the grey surroundings. Despair, deathly stillness, destruction. A light flashed and Tang Wulin entered the Star Do battle network again. Above his head, there were two arrows that pointed upward. They were gold and silver. The silver arrow had appeared after he won his first mecha battle. It undoubtedly represented his qualifications to proceed to the next round. The second match came sooner than he expected. The high-technology battle network was great in the sense that even though there were millions of contestants, the matches could be finished within the shortest amount of time. Compared to actual combat, it was very convenient. A faint light flickered, and Tang Wulin smiled slightly. He joined his hands in front of his chest and kept the golden dragon spear in his embrace. Yes, the spear would not leave his hands. The pole of the spear shone with a brilliant golden light, but it was much dimmer than before. Tang Wulin's understanding of the golden dragon spear had changed slightly after wielding the spear for 2 days. He had discovered that the golden dragon spear's size could be altered according to his will. The golden dragon spear in his hands was currently only 2 feet long. Its glow was more contained right now and did not attract as much attention. It now looked small, elegant, and cute in its own exquisite way. The second match was about to start. He wondered what kind of an opponent he would be meeting today. Tang Wulin no longer had high hopes with his luck. He had been focused on understanding the spear's consciousness and cultivating his soul power. He was now hoping that his opponent would be more powerful. A worthy opponent would be able to stimulate his potential more. With that smile on his face, Tang Wulin stretched his limbs and strode into the competition ground. Before him, there were scores of figures joining the match as clusters of lights. Everyone who came here today had golden arrows that were pointing upward above their heads. After the first elimination round, half of the contestants must have already ended their matches. Today, almost half of them would be eliminated again. It's time for the match, little Tang, get ready for the competition. A light flashed, and he re-entered the competition ground. Holding the golden dragon spear in his hands, Tang Wulin looked at what was facing him. His opponent had a slender figure and seemed to be a female. The name above her head was concealed, and there were no clues as to her identity since she also had a mask on. 3, 2, 1. Let the match begin. Tang Wulin. The voice that came from opposite him was filled with fury. Tang Wulin was stunned. This voice was very familiar to him. This can't be. This luck of mine is truly rotten. I wonder if it's my luck that's rotten or is it hers? Yes, was that not Long Yushua's voice? Long Yushua had threatened him even before the start of the first match that he could not win against her. However, the two of them had been put against each other now. How could this not be seen as a farcical situation? Without a doubt, Long Yushua had known his identity through the golden dragon spear in his hands. They were having a meal together not long ago. Tang Wulin was speechless. Don't think that you can defeat me so easily. Let's see what you got. Long Yushua's voice went from angry to ice cold. The other thing that turned ice cold was the temperature on the competition stage. Tang Wulin could not help but feel a tinge of helplessness. He could have high battle spirits no matter who his opponent was. However, when he was faced with this person before him, he truly did not have the will to battle. He was still very grateful to Long Yushua. Ever since he joined the Blood God army, Long Yushua had given him a lot of help. It could be said that without Long Yushua's assistance, he would certainly not have been able to blend in with the army so quickly. If it were not for her bringing him into actual combat, he would not have the chance to display his strength that easily and join the Blood God battalion. Hence, Tang Wulin was still grateful to her. However, this competition was vital to his mission. This would determine whether he would have the right to apply for leave to meet his beloved. He could not afford to lose. Tang Wulin had never fought with Long Yushua before, but he was aware that she was very skilled in her long-range attack abilities, especially her impressive control of soul weapons and timing. However, he did not know anything about her martial soul or cultivation base. Tang Wulin figured out that Long Yushua was an elemental-type soul master after 5 soul rings arose from underneath her feet. Her martial soul was ice. Sticks of icicles emerged from the area surrounding her body. She looked just like an enormous ice hedgehog. Tang Wulin could not see which of her soul rings was glowing under the concealment of the icicles. However, the ground underneath her feet was freezing rapidly and an icy blue color was spreading in all directions. To his surprise, the temperature of the huge competition stage was dropping swiftly. What was that? Her domain? A 5-ringed soul king capable of creating a domain? Oh, my God! What sort of monsters are in this army? No wonder she's capable of becoming a lieutenant colonel at such a young age. Not because she's lucky, but because of her abilities. Even though Tang Wulin was not planning to lose on purpose, but he would still allow her to launch a few attacks anyhow. He could tell that Long Yushue would need some time to unleash her domain-type ability, so he might as well give her the chance. Tang Wulin's expression suddenly changed because he discovered that while he did not try to disable Long Yushue's domain, she herself appeared to have no intention of stopping it from spreading. It had only taken a moment before the domain had already covered 1/3 of the entire competition arena. The arena had a diameter of 500 meters. It was made exceedingly spacious for mecha battles. Tang Wulin's Golden Dragon Rage domain could only cover an area of 100 meters in diameter when it was unleashed. This was far more significant than just being 5 times larger. Long Yushue's domain area had already exceeded Tang Wulin's Golden Dragon Rage domain in size, and her domain was even more powerful in the sense that it came with multiplying effect. The larger the domain became, the lower the temperature in the space dropped. It seemed to have a cumulative effect so that the lower temperature would accelerate the growth of the domain once again. What's happening? Could it be that her domain can actually cover the entire competition arena? That's a little too terrifying, right? Tang Wulin remained still, while he was feeling shocked in his heart. He would like to see how far Long Yushue could actually go. The temperature continued to drop while the densely arranged icicles around Long Yushue had already completely covered her body. It was so cold around Tang Wulin, a drop of water would freeze. The mist from his breath turned into ice powder that scattered in the air, so the temperature had gone down to at least -50°C now. Long Yushue's domain did not manage to cover the entire competition arena. The icicles around her body finally flew out when the domain spread out until it had covered almost half of the arena. The icicles were flying in all directions. Within the domain, the icicles were shooting at a manageable speed, but they were growing larger shockingly fast. The icicles that were less than a foot in diameter initially had already enlarged to 1 meter in length by the time they were 50 meters from Tang Wulin's body. The icicle's tip was sharp while its end was thick and heavy as they shot straight for Tang Wulin with a sharp howling noise. Tang Wulin raised his golden dragon spear and shook his wrist. With a flash of gold, an icicle exploded into pieces in the air. However, the shattered ice powder did not disperse and turned Tang Wulin's body cold for a moment. Tang Wulin felt cold despite his physique and blood essence power, so one could only imagine how low the temperature was after the icicle had exploded. 1 icicle, 2 icicles, it was as if all the icicles in the air had eyes as they flew in Tang Wulin's direction. The explosion of icicles did no harm to Tang Wulin, but he soon discovered that as the surrounding temperature continued dropping, large patches of the ground began to freeze. On the other hand, Long Yushue's domain, which had already stopped growing in the distance, began to spread in his direction once again. How can that be? Her domain is capable of growing by itself. Tang Wulin was aware that he could not wait anymore. The person that he was acquainted with turned out to be a most terrifying foe. Long Yushue grew up in the Endless Mountains ever since she was young, so there was no telling if there were some other peculiar abilities that he was unaware of. Tang Wulin touched the tip of his toes against the ground and dashed in Long Yushue's direction in a flash. The ground was very slippery, but Tang Wulin was not put off by that. Diamond-shaped scales grew out from underneath his feet. Under his control, the scales perked upright and pierced the ice surface, firm enough that he could completely exert his strength to dash in Long Yushue's direction. Long Yushue scoffed. Her feet moved ever so slightly as her body began to accelerate and arrived over 100 meters away in a flash. How was that possible? Tang Wulin was truly astonished now. It was unbelievable that Long Yushue's domain could do such a thing. There was no doubt that applying her domain in this way was derived from her own attribute and could only be described as an original idea. However, he had no choice but to admit that Long Yuxue was genuinely powerful, as her domain was already unleashed completely. There was no way he could catch up just by relying on speed. Long Yuxue raised her hand and shot out shards of icicles. The icicles were small when they first flew out, but they grew bigger and bigger. The icicles flew toward Tang Wulin like cannonballs with eyes. Of course, Tang Wulin's body, which seemed to be made of bronze, could not be damaged by the icicles so easily, no matter how large they were. Yet, the issue was that these icicles were proving capable of reducing his speed. The icy surface also restricted his movements while amplifying Long Yuxue's. The domain consumed a large amount of Long Yuxue's energy, yet the icicles were nothing for her. It was very difficult to tell which one of them would run out of energy first. Tang Wulin spoke with a bitter smile, "Stop playing around." Long Yuxue spoke with a cold voice, "Who's playing with you? Defeat me if you can. I won't show you any mercy." Tang Wulin felt speechless, for he wondered who it was that was showing mercy. "What should I do, huh?" "Of course, there's a way." "I'll be straightforward then," said Tang Wulin helplessly. Long Yuxue scoffed once. "I'd like to see if you can be straightforward too for a change." Tang Wulin paused for a moment first before he inhaled a deep breath. In reality, the easiest way was to unleash his battle armor and rely on his armor's ability to fly. This way, the ground could not restrict his speed anymore and he could catch up to Long Yuxue. Yet, the opponent was just a one-word battle armor master. Was he considered a bully if he were to unleash his two-word battle armor? Thinking about it, he managed to find a solution. The golden dragon spear thrust out from Tang Wulin's hand slowly after he inhaled a deep breath. It was not stabbing in Long Yuxue's direction but into the air. Long Yuxue managed to pull out more distance between herself and Tang Wulin. Tang Wulin was right in the center of the arena. Long Yuxue was stunned for a moment as well upon witnessing the spear. What was the boy doing? However, her expression changed soon because she saw a layer of densely arranged scales emerge on Tang Wulin's body when the spear moved forward. It was Tang Wulin's golden dragon body. Long Yuxue had seen Tang Wulin unleash the scales before, but it was as if Tang Wulin's entire body was glowing while his disposition also changed unexpectedly as soon as the spear thrust out. He still looked the same, but his dominant manner seemed to soar far beyond them, and he was exuding a solemn, untouchable aura. It was as he was subduing the chill in the air. A 7-meter-long glowing spear burst out soon after the spear was thrust forward. An intense blood essence fluctuation burst into life. Not only that, rings of light scattered underneath Tang Wulin. 4 golden soul rings began to shimmer and alternated with his 5 martial soul rings. Dozens of blue-silver grass blades spread out in all directions simultaneously as his spear thrust out, covering a large area in an instant. On the other hand, the hard ice on the ground began to vanish soundlessly wherever the blue-silver grass passed. Long Yuxue was even more shocked to see that ice-blue color clearly appeared on the blue-silver grass. The blue color was surging into Tang Wulin's body and gradually transformed into faint golden radiance less than 5 meters away from him before fusing into his body. What was that? She was vaguely aware that Tang Wulin's martial soul was a plant type, but she was uncertain which. At present, she was filled with disbelief and confusion as she watched him breaking her domain in such a manner. Soon after, Tang Wulin thrust the spear forward again. The first spear's radiance was still shimmering in the sky when the second spear's radiance had already flickered violently and even brighter and further than the first one in the sky. More and more vines were slowly emerging from Tang Wulin's body. These vines were uneven, but every time one stretched out, a portion of the domain on the ground disappeared. Taking a step forward, Tang Wulin began to advance. This time, the golden dragon spear he held in front of his body shook abruptly and created dozens of spears of light in an instant. Countless golden spears shimmered in the air and gave out a series of violent sonic booms. The sound made it feel like the entire arena was tearing itself into pieces. The chill was further dispersed. Tang Wulin took 9 steps forward in succession, which caused thousands of lights to burst out from the center of the competition arena at once. On the other hand, Long Yuxue was very surprised to find that Tang Wulin's aura strengthened with every step he took, while the scales on his body glowed brighter. The overbearing aura oppressed her so much that she could not even bring herself to even try to attack him. She had known that Tang Wulin was very powerful, but they had always been comrades in arms. Thus, she had no idea what it felt like to fight against him. Tang Wulin had not even attacked her, but she could profoundly understand Jiang Wuyue's agony earlier. The domineering aura was even more terrifying than a direct attack, as there was no way she could dodge. Long Yuxue felt like her spirit and thoughts were being seized by Tang Wulin, while her ice attribute, that had been strengthening thanks to her ice domain, was weakening. Tang Wulin did not even bother to look in Long Yuxue's direction as he thrust his spear forward and unleashed his strongest soul power fluctuation. Every fiber of his being was completely focused into the 1,000 accusing fingers and his spear's consciousness. His martial soul and bloodline power were being released under the constant stimulation of the spear's consciousness. They were trying out different types of combinations. He had not used any of his soul skills, only the spear's radiance. Dazzling streams of light burst from the spear, linking into one another and continuously empowering his aura. It was the best feeling ever. He could not release his weapon's consciousness in such a brazen manner within the army, but he could do so now. He could unleash everything he had considered over the past few days in the simulated competition arena. He was still far from his goals, but he had managed to find the weapon's consciousness that was unique to him. He cultivated and slept together with his golden dragon spear every day, and this was finally beginning to show some results. The golden dragon spear hummed and vibrated as its consciousness was gently released. It was the best method that allowed Tang Wulin to achieve mastery in the use of his martial soul and bloodline power. Long Yuxue could clearly see that there was a thin layer of gold with a scale-like pattern appearing on the blue-silver emperor vines that were imitating the movement of the spear. It was as if every vine was Tang Wulin's spear covered with the golden dragon body. This was the overlaying effect of his bloodline power and soul power. This was something that Tang Wulin had never realized before. He had never thought that his soul power and blood essence power could produce some kind of relationship before old Tang's reminder. At that moment, he finally understood where he went wrong. He did not possess twin martial souls, having only his one blue-silver grass martial soul. His blood essence power was supposed to be assisting his martial soul in battle. He had forgotten about this all along because his Golden Dragon King bloodline was powerful enough to be used on its own. He recalled his experience while participating in the Star Luo Continent's competition when the Fox King Sumu once used his bloodline power to amplify his martial soul. Yet, he had never attempted to do so in the past, having only allowed his martial soul to be silently influenced by his bloodline. He possessed a mountain of treasure all along which he had never even tried to use. How foolish he was. In reality, one reason Tang Wulin had never gone down this path was that his own bloodline power was so great. The other reason was that he was so influenced by his bloodline soul ring, he had assumed that these two soul rings could never possibly appear together in his subconscious mind. He regarded his bloodline power as a twin martial soul. He was suddenly enlightened after old Tang's prompt that his bloodline power was not his martial soul. He was supposed to be able to alternate between those two at his convenience. He should be able to fuse these two together, not just alternate between two, in order to reach his full potential. At this exact moment, his martial soul and bloodline power had finally begun to fuse with every thrust of his spear. The dragon core on his chest was slowly sinking. The golden radiance covered his entire body while simultaneously surging into the soul power vortex in his abdomen. The crystal-like form on the inside was becoming clearer and clearer. Tang Wulin suddenly thrust his spear forward while the hundreds of spears of light fused into one. All the golden blue-silver emperor vines abruptly stood upright, reflecting the spear's consciousness. Long Yuxue's domain exploded with a loud bang and transformed into an icy mist that rose into the air. However, the ice mist immediately dispersed as soon as it went near Tang Wulin. This was the elemental stripping effect derived from the silent influence of the blue-silver golden array. Even though the soul skill was not used yet, a portion of its energy was released during the shimmering process his soul power and bloodline power had undergone. It was so powerful. The intense energy fluctuation was glowing in the air. Tang Wulin took a quick step forward and swept his golden dragon spear horizontally across all the blue-silver emperor vines. A great golden light bloomed out of thin air. Tang Wulin laughed aloud and shouted out, "Golden dragon body!" In an instant, all the blue-silver emperor vines were illuminated. The thin layer of gold suddenly turned bright. It was as if every vine of the blue-silver emperor was really coated with golden dragon scales. They did not appear like vines anymore but genuine giant dragons. However, Tang Wulin immediately felt that his blood essence power and soul power were rapidly being depleted at the same time. It was apparent that he had to pay a price for combining the two. Tang Wulin pointed ahead with the golden dragon spear in his head and yelled aloud, "Golden dragon soars to the heaven!" Countless blue-silver emperor vines jutted forward out like the golden dragon spear. A giant golden dragon over 20 meters long bloomed out from the golden dragon spear before dashing forward valiantly. On the other hand, puffs of fine golden dragon energy were spurting out from the tips of the blue-silver emperor vines. The dragon energy attached itself to the golden dragon, doubling the power of the golden dragon soars to the heaven in the space of one breath. It dashed toward the front boldly like a real dragon descending. Tang Wulin was overjoyed. There was no doubt that he had succeeded, even though the golden dragon soars to the heaven consumed twice the bloodline power and a larger amount of soul power compared to ordinary circumstances. Yet, the power of the blast was more than doubled. Moreover, it had completely exceeded the limits of his rank. Only martial soul fusion skills could rival this ability of his. 2 soul masters were required to launch a martial soul fusion skill, and it consumed a lot of energy once it was launched, so it was difficult to relaunch within a short period of time, and there was only a single method. Yet, Tang Wulin's fusion of martial soul and bloodline could be applied to any of his abilities. How could this ever be rivaled by a simple martial soul fusion skill? Long Yushue had already dropped her arms. She watched the golden dragon spreading its wings and roaring nonchalantly in the air, and she understood that she did not even stand any chance. She had only experienced such complete helplessness when she was fighting against her father. How powerful was he? How far would he go before he reached his limit? Long Yushue was so shocked, she had already forgotten that she was still in the competition and that person showing off in the center of the arena was her opponent. Tang Wulin's body swayed after he had retracted the golden dragon spear. He stamped his right foot against the ground and loudly cried, "Golden dragon shakes the earth." This video will end here. Like video and subscribe to my channel.